Oh, how wonderful to see you here this afternoon. Thank you for coming to this conversation. We'll be doing some sharing, but this is really intended to be a conversation to talk about your chapter and how to become more engaged and ready to do some preparation in case there is a disaster. Because what we know is that they can happen, and what we also know is that if we've done some preparing, the more prepared we are, the more resilient we are. That the people who have planned and who've prepared ahead of time and who are comfortable with that plan are the ones that are able to come back more quickly after something like an event has happened. Now, quickly is a really relative term, of course. So I'm from the Redwood Empire, and I've been there for 3 years. Before that, I was in the Inland Empire chapter, was president down there, and programs chair, and in the Inland Empire, or the Redwood Empire, sorry, I've been chair of the Disaster Response Committee, and now I'm president of that chapter. So it's been a wonderful experience for me to get on in the leadership. And I'm really happy to be here with Catherine. And Catherine, do you want to speak into the microphone and introduce yourself? Hello.
Hi. Yes, I'm Catherine Laff. I'm current board secretary of CAMT, and I'm founder and past president of the Southwest Riverside County chapter. And so I'm here just to kind of help facilitate and share a recent experience that I went through that happened in Thousand Oaks.
So we're going to start with an exercise that I recently learned from the Mind Body Medicine Center for Mind Body Medicine, and they're an organization that's based on the East Coast, and they sent staff to come to Santa Rosa to teach us about mind body medicine as an opportunity for us to learn how to work with trauma, and especially to engage people from the community in circles where we could teach them skills and have them really learn a practice of how to manage trauma. We're going to start with that, and so what I'm going to encourage for you to do right now is just put your pens down for a minute. Put your feet on the floor. Just let everything sort of slide off your shoulders for a few moments. If you'd like, you could find a place where you can make a soft gaze. Just pick a place to look, or you might close your eyes gently if you wish. And as you're doing that you are also beginning to notice your breath and draw your attention into your breathing, allowing yourself to notice the rise and fall of your body. And that as you breathe in, you could use the word soft. And as you breathe out, you could use the word belly. And just noticing as you breathe in, you might use the word soft. And as you breathe out, you might use the word belly. And that as you're doing this, you're letting your body know that all is well in the moment, that you're taking care of yourself, that you're slowing down, and just taking perhaps another breath or two and bringing that to completion. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes, coming back to the room. So Catherine's going to start by sharing a recent experience that she had.
So, so just give some information about me. I've, obviously have experience in helping others, and I went through a trauma response program at the Chicago School, and as also part of my dissertation, I interviewed 9/11 family members on what the mental health response was for them after 9/11. Not good, but that's a whole other subject. But so recently, back in November, I was getting ready to go to bed. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I get this text from my brother who's in London, and he he copied a Twitter tweet about how there's been this shooting in Thousand Oaks, which is my hometown, and that there were multiple casualties. And at first I just thought, this can't be true. I mean, this is probably one of those fake news things. And then I went on Twitter and there was like nothing. And he goes, no, you have to go to the Ventura County Fire and look. And so then I went to that, and then it was just all starting, to come in. That was like 11:30. So I was tweeting him back and forth about it, and kind of followed it till about 2 a.m, knowing that my 87-year-old mom is still living there in Thousand Oaks and was going to wake up, to this news. So it went to bed, and then in the morning, she starts texting me, upset, and of course it was then breaking out all over the news, and it was just pretty traumatic to see the video and everything that was happening, and I'm just like, wow, well, mass shootings have, finally, hit home. And so I was kind of sitting with that, through the afternoon. And then I get this text from my mom. It says, now we have a fire. And I was just like, oh, okay, we get fires. But I then kind of started following it. And I got another text. She's like, it's a big fire. And so this was the Hill Fire. So, and then she posted a picture of it on Twitter, and it was all these flames on the hillside that was like literally down the street from where my mom lives. And so I was like, oh, no. And then I hear about this other fire that broke out, the Woolsey Fire. And that was like on the opposite direction. So my mom lives here, the Hill Fire broke out here, and the Woolsey Fire here. And so the 101 freeway, which is the way out, was blocked at both ends. So it was getting to be, I think it was like 6 o'clock at night. And luckily I didn't go to work that day. I just decided to stay and work from home, which was a good thing because I had a 3-hour commute. And so I'm looking at the news, and I'm getting this text from my mom, saying that, we may have to evacuate. And I was thinking, my mom can't do this by herself. She has 2 cats. And then she said, the tweet that got to me was, she tweeted, I just remember I can't drive in the dark. Mm. And I go, that's it. And so now suddenly I was kind of in the helper position, but it was more, I was just feeling like, oh no, my family is spread out all over. I'm like the closest to my mom, so I know this was going to be on me. And so it's weird what you do when you have to act, because I could see the fire was getting close. And then I'm just standing there in my closet like, oh, I should pack something, so I'm probably going to go for a couple nights. I did none of that. I was just standing there, and I went, I just got to go. And I just got in my car and just drove. And of course, when I got to Thousand Oaks, the freeway was blocked off because of the fire. And then the only place I could get off was on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. It took me right past the borderline shooting where there's all this police. And I'm like, how am I going to get to my mom? And so I just started following other cars. We were just kind of driving in circles. And then I finally found Borchard Road, which I know leads right to my mom. And so I just got on that and drove and got there. And she was just so happy to see me. And she went to bed peacefully, I think, because she knew I was there. But I was up the whole night, and I just can't believe how incredibly stressful this whole event was. And I didn't lose any family members. My mom didn't lose her house, but just that stress of staying up all night. I'm looking out her back window, patio, seeing this huge orange glow. And sometimes it would get bigger and sometimes it would get smaller. And just not knowing, when should we go and can we get out of here? And then we're listening to the reports. I'm getting calls from other family members, from my nieces, texting me, "How's mom? Are you going to be able to get her out of here?" And then finally, we got the order, I think it was like 4 a.m., that says, the area was under voluntary evacuation. I go, "Well, what does that mean?" So I looked it up, and it basically means prepare to pack, start packing, because you're probably going to have to leave. So I started to get that ready for my mom, and then at like 6 a.m., I was watching this orange glow and it was like gone. And I'm like, oh, I know the fire's not out, but how come I'm not seeing it? So I went out front across the street and looked up in the sky. There was this huge black smoke and flames, and it was all then going towards Malibu. And then I could look over here from the hill fire over there, and I was just like, we got to get out of here. This is just so stressful. And so I was monitoring the freeways, and I saw that the 23, the Fillmore freeway, was open, that we could hop on and take to the 210. So I was texting my brother, and I said, I'm making an executive decision here that I'm going to take mom out of here. And he's like, "I totally support you 100%. So when my mom woke up, I said, "We're leaving." And I was shocked. She didn't argue with me at all. So we struggled to get her 2 big fat cats that are like 13 years old into this carrier, and loaded them up in the car. And my mom, following in my suit, said, "I'm not going to bring any clothes. Let's just go." So she had nothing. But we just packed up everything in the car, and as we're leaving, we get on the 23, just the whole hillside was just like in flames. And the air quality was horrible. It was like smoky, but I was just really paying attention to my body too, about how tight and how stressed I was. And then as soon as we got out of the area and I saw all this blue sky, and I could look back and see all the smoke and flames behind me, this total relief that came over me. It was just like, we're safe, we got out, and it was so quick that I just haven't experienced something like that before, where you're so tense and scared and worried, and then as soon as you get to a safe place, you're just completely relaxed. So this whole experience has taught me, because I've never been in this type of position where it was so serious, that what people go through when they lose family members and their house, and I can't even imagine, because this was so stressful for me and lost nothing. So it's just something that really hit home that I wanted to come and share. I'm now on the Crisis Response and Resource Committee, and partly I'm glad that I'm on it because I'm learning a lot of new resources and stuff that I can, use personally for my own community, as well as assist my local chapter, so that we can help out our communities when the time comes. So I don't know if anybody had any questions or anything. Okay. How are you?
Oh, I live in Westlake Village. And I was on my roof. We were ordered evacuated, and I identify with that. I'm at the time was dealing with a first responder who was a deputy sheriff, and thinking about it and reliving it. Here I am on my roof with a hose, and then I have to go shower, and then go to my office, which is down the road, and put my mental health practitioner's hat on. And deputy sheriffs are, I'm a retired probation officer, so I have some trust and affinity. They have a trust with me. And it was quite interesting. I had to monitor myself in that room at the time, because we were ordered evacuated out of the area, and my wife had left and gone over to our son. So afterwards, two things occurred to me. One, that I was prepared. We had loaded stuff. You're given, like, literally, get the hell out is what they tell you. But I had enough stuff organized in my head that I grabbed certain books with all of our important data on it, and some cash that I had, put it in the back, and I told my wife go, and she took and left. But the point I'm after in all this is later on, the mental health community in Thousand Oaks came together, and through the Given Hour program, they've offered several days of free therapy for people who want it. But also for myself, being prepared. I have a generator, I have food, I have all of these things, because living in California, you never know when the quake's going to hit, whatever else. But for me, that gave me a sense of, I think, comfort, and yeah, it was comfort. If you want, it might be kind of let me play this for you, because I'm on my roof and I'm looking at Westlake Boulevard, which is next door to me. If you can hear that. There were 7 fire trucks going by me heading to the fire. And from the hill fire, which is on your right, you see that column of smoke, and the winds prevailing from the north blowing south to the ocean. And then on my left was the Woolsey fire coming from the Chatsworth area. So you can see the film, you have this massive black column, and thank God the winds are behind. So I was breathing basically clean air, while everybody around is. So again, the point I'm after was the sense of being prepared ahead of time, and then monitoring yourself, and then afterwards debriefing myself. My 2 roommates are psychiatrists on either side. I said, guys, I need an hour. But anyways, yeah.
So I kind of wanted to ask, as you were listening to Catherine, and it's
Howard
right now, what are you noticing right now in yourself? What are you picking up?
In myself, I notice that I'm tense too, because I live in the area too, so it kind of like rushes all of the memories back
Okay.
from that time
Sure.
period.
So you're feeling
Yep.
some of the tension yourself, and
Absolutely.
I don't even live in that area, and I don't think I've taken a breath the whole time. I feel like I'm just like in a little knot. You know what I mean?
so let's take a breath right now. I saw a picture of the vagus nerve this week for the first time. And if you have not seen a picture of the vagus nerve, I invite you to Google it. This thing is amazing. It's like, it starts up here and it goes right to your stomach, but it spans like all of that. So when we're doing that mind-body breathing that I just taught you at the beginning, you're exactly speaking to your vagus nerve and helping it to settle down. And of course, what we know is that's where part of that mind-body connection lives. That vagus nerve connects our brain with our guts. And so the minute that vagus nerve is starting to get activated, what's happening is exactly the responses that you're feeling. You stop breathing, you shut down. We begin to, feel that anxiousness. And so that's why I'm sharing the little thing about the breath, because really it begins there. That's even when you're working with people, like right at the get-go when they're going through disaster response in the moment, you can teach them that simple skill of take a breath, check in with yourself, just notice what's going on in your body right now. And already what they're doing at that moment in time is they're taking some control. What is it about? We want to have a sense of control. And the thing that we lose in the moment of a disaster is control. It's, chaos ensues. we don't function well in chaos. We don't like chaos. And so that's what we're trying to regain. And so that's what we're doing too in our conversation today. Anything else that you noticed as you were listening to Catherine's
Susan.
So I noticed that one thing that made me like tense, because I can feel your tension about it too, is the lack of information you were getting. Like, it seemed like you were struggling for information. You were getting it from odd sources, but you really weren't getting it from the sources you were expecting to get it from. Like, should you leave? Should you go? I mean, like, and I'm like, should she leave? Should she leave? I want information, and you want information. It feels like it would have been relieving some stress if I had more information. I don't know if that anybody else was feeling that too.
Because you want like a definitive response answer, like
Yeah,
yes, do
so
this,
maybe
do
that's
this, and do that,
being in
and nobody
control.
really even.
Yeah, that's probably the being in control. Maybe information is part of the control that you have. If you know what's coming, if you know what to do in advance, even if you're in there, if you just know there's a plan, you know there's a way out, the relief you felt when you found that road, you know, like, okay, I got it. I found a road that we could do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can I share?
Go ahead, Heather.
I just noticed in both the stories the dilemma between helper and victim. Trying to figure out like, what should I be right now? Am I both, or can I be one?
Yeah, I was able to become more of a therapist once I got to my own home with my mom, and then I could help her. It's like, okay, we're safe, don't worry about that now. What does she need? So that was nice.
I think somebody already mentioned this, but just the amount of tension that happens in the body, as you were talking, but like, just like throughout, just like whether that sensation that it just goes from bottom up or up down, whatever, like your whole body starts to tense. And also just reminding me of like the vicarious trauma, the trauma of like witnessing event. I'm from Chico, but I live in San Diego, so when everything was happening up there and I'm far away, I'm like on every Facebook page and I'm watching all of it, and you don't have that control, and you're just like, but I also was just like, couldn't barely do my work. I would like see a client and lay on my own couch because it's like I couldn't like, it was like I just was having a hard time like not being able to help. So yeah, fatigue, all that, yeah.
Go ahead.
I live in Northern California, and a couple years ago when the fires were happening up there, fire came into my county and my area, and fortunately it didn't get close to my particular house, but I also work in county mental health and we're first responders. So listening to you, Catherine, and your story, it brought back, not only was I tense, but it brought back those memories, and also, you know, what do I do if I'm at work and I'm a first responder, but I'm worried about my house, and, you know, that whole, what do I do first? What do I, you know, and fortunately it didn't, you know, the fire was arrested before it got to either my workplace area or my my home area, but it was like touch and go, and I was wondering, you know, should I pack a bag? Should I have a bag in my car ready to go? So I am available as a first responder. What do I do?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think a lot of the things we're touching on here are about the fact that when we are in the situation, it's too late to begin our planning. Okay. So if there's anything you walk away with today, it's about think through, just for yourself first of all and your family. What are your strategies? Do you have somebody outside of the state that you can be in contact with so that other family members can be in contact with? Do you have an escape plan? Do you have your go bag? Do you have something set up at your office in case you're at your office when this happens? What if you're at your office and your kids are at school and your spouse is at work? How are you going to be in contact with each other? In Santa Rosa, after the fires in 2017, we had no cell service. So we couldn't, there was no phone calling. Thankfully, I think within a few hours, we had text messaging, but no phone calls for several days. So talk about feeling cut off, and no emails. So that was scary. And I think making sure that you've got some ideas about what you're going to do in that situation. Because of course, if it's, obviously you're going to take care of yourself and your families first. I mean, I hope that that's what would be your choice. I think that that's really the most important thing, is you've got to look after your kids and your spouse and yourself and your parents. And then once you've got all that settled, then you can bring your attention to clients or to other people in the community. And the realization that both the Paradise fires and all your fires down here in Santa Rosa are teaching us is that there's not enough first responders to be a first responder to each one of us. And so most of us will not have a first responder coming to our aid. And that they're the ones that are going to go to where the worst of the incidents are, or wherever they can get to it. And so we have to really be prepared ourselves to take the actions that we need to take.
And I just want to add too about the go bag. I think that is so important because even though I had time to pack something, you're so stressed that you just can't even do it. It's like you just have to act. You just have to go. And it was just, I just had to go. And even my mom, I'm like, okay, we're going to leave. And she got like her necessary papers, in case the house burnt down. But she's like, let's just go. I mean, she didn't want to pack anything either. And it wasn't like, the flames were bearing down, but it was just, you're so stressed, you just can't do it.
It's just fight or flight.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
so
flight.
you just want to have that ready to go grab. Because I was like so shocked. I'm like, yeah, I could do this, but I felt in my body, I can't. I just have to go. So.
I want to comment if I
Go
can.
ahead. Sure.
When we got the notice at 6 a.m., I felt more helpless in beginning to pack and put stuff together. And then when we made the decision for my wife to go and I to stay, I felt a lot better, even though it was in direct violation of the order to evacuate. And there was another gentleman down the street who a dear friend who's a reserve sheriff, and he and I talked. And I think I felt a lot better once I made that decision to stay. The car ready to go. We had an escape route planned. I know I would have been a lot worse off going to our son's house in Moore Park and sitting there with nothing to do that allows you to feel like you're doing something, and watching the TV and the fires, and you're looking out and you see the smoke all around you and you're wondering about your house. And the reality was that he and I were in the neighborhood when some bad guys came through and were looking to loot. And you knew they were bad guys because they were, years of experience tells me they weren't there to help out. Well, they were there to help, but not out. So
Help themselves.
they were helping themselves. Yeah, so my point is that I think once you have the go bag ready, you have everything set, I had to empower myself to feel better by doing something. And, I took heat. Why didn't you leave? You should have left. So you had to deal with that. But I know for me, emotionally, I would have been worse off leaving.
And so those are some things to think about too. Just even in your planning about what am I going to do? Here's plan A, plan B, plan C, but you've had some of these conversations, hard conversations, like are we going to split up? Some people regretted splitting up because then they got separated from each other and they ended up at different shelters and couldn't find each other. Other people, for them it was a good thing to split up because, they were able to save both of their vehicles. And so those are difficult decisions, and there isn't an answer to that per se. And those are, more of the, the personal things. But I also want to make sure that we talk about, as a chapter, what can you do and how can you prepare a response? So I think, we've kind of covered the fact that we wanted to talk about, the personal response, but we also want to talk about the chapter response. Did you want to say some things about that, Catherine? Did you have any thoughts on that so far? I'm going to give you this.
Well, I would just like to hear how your chapter got started and, forming a committee, or how you became organized so that you can respond to a chapter, because you guys did so well in the fire. So I'd like to hear about that.
Sure. We had a committee going already and had some people that were coming to those meetings. We began getting involved with the Red Cross. I think the fact that at the time, the amount of work that was involved in becoming a volunteer was making it difficult for people to really fully get on board with Red Cross.
Right.
So that was a challenge, a real hurdle that I don't think we fully addressed at this point. And I think, it makes me kind of sad because I know the Red Cross really needs more disaster mental health people on board. And at the same time, some of their requirements make it so daunting. I did go through the whole training and got to become a disaster mental health. And I found that once I was on board, it was not nearly as demanding as I'd imagined. I mean, I had options about whether I wanted to deploy or not. You never have to. They did ask in our community if you would be on call. I think it was 7 shifts per month, and they're 12-hour shifts. But it doesn't mean that you're sitting somewhere at a desk or have to go anywhere. It would be often that I signed up for the night shift, and I hardly ever got a call. So it was more once in a while they would give me a call and say, could you go visit this person? Their house just burned down, or we've got this person over here. And mostly it was house fires or apartment fires and those kinds of things that we were responding to. One of my challenges ended up with the fact that I do crisis intervention as part of my work, and then I was on the disaster response committee, and then I was seeing clients, and then I was doing DMH. And at some point I felt like I can't be doing this as a volunteer on my time off, because I just need to have some space to do something for fun and something that gives me a break, not more of the same. And that's when I decided to take a leave of absence from the Red Cross. And at the same time also, I was stepping up to become president-elect, and that was another commitment. And I have 2 grandchildren, so I'm a grandmother. And so, there's lots of things to do in life. And that was, for me, the choice that I needed to make. I think the Red Cross is an amazing organization, and what their role is more when something happens, you go right at the time and you work in the shelters that are set up. You might be doing some mental health stuff, or you might be helping dish out food, wherever they need you. If you have to set up cots, if you have to play with the kids, that's kind of what you end up doing. They do, of course, value our skills, and if you were to go for a deployment for a couple of weeks somewhere, which is generally, if you do deploy, it's at least a 2-week commitment, 10 days to 2 weeks, then you would be going more in the role of disaster mental health. But it doesn't mean you're sitting there doing therapy all day long. You're mingling with people and sort of checking in with them and helping out wherever you're needed. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit. I know you guys organized a lot of volunteers in your chapter to do free counseling for folks that were affected by the fire in Santa Rosa and surrounding areas. Can you speak about how your chapter got that going and what you did?
Sure. So right after the fire, I was asked if I could come and do a training for the people, for the clinical people in our area. And so I put together 2-hour video, which is available on our website if you want to take a look at it. And it's kind of the nuts and bolts of psychological first aid and how the kind of help that you give to people in response to a disaster is kind of different from therapy, because, people who are going through a disaster don't necessarily have a DSM diagnosis. They're going through acute stress. And so they don't, it's not that there's some kind of pathology going on, it's just that they're having normal reactions to very abnormal and overwhelming events. So I did a training about that. And we had probably 150 people who showed up for that. And then we invited those that participated to let us know if they wanted to be on a list of therapists. And we would post that on our website. And I think that list might still be on our website now. There's not as long a list, but there's still names of people there who are willing to do some free sessions for people who've gone through fire and who are still struggling with that. And believe it or not, there are still people coming out of the woodwork now, all of this many months later, who are finally at a point where they're saying, I can't cope with what's going on. I've done this and this and this and this, and we're still just barely breaking ground for our house, and I'm just can't handle it anymore. Or maybe it's a family member that's really struggling, and so they're dealing with that family member and those kinds of things. So that was one thing. Laura put together this list, and then people could go through the list and make some phone calls. And if they had contacted our chapter, we did our best to hook them up with somebody. We also had a day at our church, at one of the churches, where we had probably about 50 or 60 therapists who came and spent the day, and we had let the community know through a variety of channels that they could come, and there would be free services there. I think that what we did was premature. I don't think people were ready. We only had 5 people show up. So, we had nice refreshments, and a lot of us kind of, got a chance to network and do some fun things, but it was too soon after the events for people to be ready to take advantage of that. So that was one thing we learned. And then let's see, what else? After that, we decided that it would be good to have drop-in groups for people to come to. So we negotiated with Catholic Charities, and they provided the space free of charge. And every Saturday for about almost 6 months, we had 2 clinicians on site and at the same time, and it was for an hour and a half. We had set up a very simple structure for the group, and people could come. The most we ever had show up was 8 people, and then a lot of times it was like 2 or 3 people, sometimes just 1 person. And eventually we didn't get any more people coming, so at that point we figured, well, we got to do something different because, this isn't needed anymore. And Laura and I put together a proposal and submitted it to a lady named Debbie Mason, who worked with the Healthcare Foundation up in Healdsburg. She's a fundraiser, and that is her job. And so she raises money for all kinds of causes. And she completely got on board with the thoughts that we had about, coming up with mental health fire response. And we contacted the National Association of Social Work and the Redwood Psychological Association got involved. NAMI got involved, and then also County Mental Health sent some people over. And through FEMA, California, Project Hope, they also sent somebody to these meetings. And we came up with a series of strategies, and rather than me spending a lot of time breaking all those down, what I'll say is that you can look online, and in this information that I have sent to you, on page 2, everywhere that you see something that looks blue, that's actually a hot link, and you are going to get these things emailed to you. And so every time, everywhere that you, did they come out in blue on yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are all hot links, which means that when you go to them in your email and you click on them, that it will give you a URL to a website that you can go to. And so each one of those is a resource for you to take a look at. So I'm going to pause a minute here for some questions or comments. Yeah.
So I work at Elizabeth Hospice in the northern part of San Diego County, and we have become community first responders, although not a natural disaster, community disasters. And unfortunately, in a very short amount of time, recently, within a couple of weeks, we had 4 tragedies at the San Marcos Unified School District, which is where my kids go to school. So talking about self-care, we had a student hit another student and killed her with his car. She was a twin, a senior getting ready to graduate. So we had to deal with the victim's family, friends on the dance team. The boy who killed her, who was on the softball team, baseball team, families, teachers, students, as you can imagine. Right after that, we had a beloved coach at the high school die of a heart attack. So we again were brought in to deal with the staff, the teachers, the parents. We had an 8th grader at the middle school who died, on and on within a very short amount of time. And so what we learned in terms of responding to these community crises on a local level was to connect with our resources. So we connected with our faith-based community church, the San Marcos School District, the Sheriff's Department, and then Elizabeth Hospice. And so from that, we know something will happen again, because every time there was a tragedy, we'd say, whew, we made it through that one, and then the very next day or a couple days later, we were brought in again. So now we have a task force, and when something happens even outside of Escondido or San Marcos, we respond. And we're in constant communication with each other. So just to point out, it doesn't have to be a huge, large-scale natural disaster, but when the community calls for us as our resources to be prepared and to know when we need to step out too. Like I said, I recuse myself when I'm dealing with my daughter's friends who are devastated over the loss of a fellow student. We also, when we did have fires in San Diego, we have patients that are actively dying, and so we had to have a plan, not only how we can support ourselves and our clients that can come to the office, but how do we move patients that are on oxygen or actively dying in their homes. So we had to put together a safety committee in terms of response and reacting to those kinds of situations as well. And then on top of that, the clients that we have are dealing with the death, and then a lot of them lost their homes. So bringing up the triggers, the secondary losses from the Harmony Grove fires, back a few years ago and whatnot. So those kinds of disasters sit with you for a very long time. And even years later, when you're dealing with something else, another challenge in your life, it can be brought right back to the surface again. You can get re-triggered. So, yeah, yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you for your story. It's very powerful.
I did have, as a chapter, I'm part of the Southwest Riverside County chapter, and I think this would be a good thing for us to start up, so that anything local that happens in our community, that our chapter could respond. Although we're pretty, I guess, a medium-sized chapter. But in looking at the outline, I just had a question. One of the number one, it says, getting some money approved to start with is also helpful. Eventually you can get a line item in the budget. So I'm just wondering, does your chapter have that, and like what amount of money would you suggest that chapters put aside for this type of activity?
For the North County San Diego chapter, we don't have money specifically for crisis, but we have brought speakers in that is their specialty. And so they come in and train us on crisis management, square breathing, how to respond to trauma. But in terms of like specific budget line item, we don't have that. And what would that fund, what would you think that was specifically?
Well, in our case, the money was intended to bring someone along for training, like bringing in somebody like Sandra Shields, who is here in Los Angeles, and I'm not exactly sure what her title is, but she works with a number of agencies together doing disaster mental health, and so she's somebody very knowledgeable, and somebody like her would cost some money to bring her in. So that would be, or perhaps if you needed to create binders for everybody and wanted to put some literature in them, it takes money to make copies and things like that. There are books that I think are useful for people to read, and so there's some information at the end of the articles that come from the therapist. There's a bibliography there, and there are a lot of helpful leads in terms of some things to read, as well as if you go on to the CAMP website underneath the CRERC, is that it? In that section there is also a lot that you can click on to read, and it's kind of like going down a rabbit hole. You click on one thing and you can go down and next one and the next
And there
one.
are steps on the website on how a chapter can get started.
Yes.
The process of it. And Sandra Shields, who you just mentioned, is currently the chair of the committee.
Yes.
So, and I'm currently on the committee too, so if you have any questions or suggestions.
So we started with a line item of $500, and then we brought in some sponsors. And after the recent fires, we had 8 families in our chapter that actually lost homes. We decided that we would pay for their camp dues for several years. We waived the dues for them to attend our chapter. We decided to pay for their legal and ethical workshops. And then we gave them gifts of money just to assist them. So those were some of the things that we set some monies aside for. So it would be training, but it could also be to help the members of your own community. And I don't know what, to say, well, here's an amount that you should shoot for. I mean, you begin with something, and then you kind of, as the committee evolves and you decide, how you want to grow and what you want to do, the kind of work that you'd like to do.
Thank you. I'm Julie from the Redding chapter in Northern California. Thank you so much for starting this out with the breath and just being mindful of that. We went through the Carr fire, and our community lost 1,000 homes in July and August, and then we had the Paradise fire where 10,000 homes were lost. What I know, we have set up community events and drop-in groups, and we didn't get the response we expected. What I have noticed is how important it has been for each of us treatment providers to be there for one another, to practice our own self-care, to stop in between sessions and breathe and debrief. I've seen a lot of first responders to take what they've seen and experienced in and then go home or expect to see the next client who could have a variety of other issues. It is so imperative for us to put our self-care first and just to be there for each other. And I think that's where our chapter is shining right now, is just checking in with each other and where are you at personally and what are you doing for self-care. So it's important. So thank you for bringing that up.
It is. It's exhausting work. It really is. And I think it takes more of a toll than we realize. And when there's that much need, I'm sure that the majority, if not everybody in this room, there's this sense of wanting to take care of everybody and make them all feel better because I want this community to heal. And then in the meantime, I'm running on fumes. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. And I really thank you for pointing that out. That's exactly right.
The compassion fatigue, that's what the language that keeps coming up for
That's
us
exactly
is just
right.
depleting if we allow it to take over.
That's exactly right.
One of the things too I wanted to share in my research with 9/11 family members, I did interviews with them at the 10-year mark, and I was asking, what did you find, most helpful? What helped you the most? And time again, what I heard was group therapy. And they said, if it was going on now, I would still be going, but the funding, ran out. But they said being able to sit with people who've been through the same experiences as I did and being able to share that was just, the most helpful. And it's interesting, I don't know if some of you saw it, but there was an article in the LA Times like about a month ago about the veterans in West LA, where the VA was discontinuing the group therapy that was being provided. And they said, well, this is an evidence-based practice. So we don't want to continue to put, funding towards this, and it's been going on for a long time. They should just, move on. And they interviewed the veterans, and they were like, these were Vietnam veterans, okay? So this has been a long time, and they're like, we still need this. We still need to sit and talk with each other. So you can just imagine, that is so important. And just because we don't have a lot of research on group therapy as an evidence-based practice, the fact that so many are saying that it's helpful, I think it's something we really need to, pay attention and consider when there is a disaster, and not just go for the individual one-on-one therapy, because the 9/11 family members said that wasn't very helpful at all. So.
In our community, one of the strategies that was funded under what became the Wildfire Collaborative, which is on your paperwork and which is a hot link, so it'll bring you to those pages. The Wildfire Collaborative was what emerged when all those different groups came together. And $1,300,000 were raised towards this collaborative. One of the strategies was what you were just talking about. And my mind just did a blank. What were you just talking about, Kevin?
9/11 family members and
Group therapy.
The group therapy. So the collaborative brought in people who had done the Skills for Psychological Training, and it's a 2-day course that I think about 450 people in the community have been through that training now, and there's another group getting ready to go through. And part of that is a set of 5 skills that people are encouraged to focus on, one being kind of assessing what is most important right now in terms of doing some problem solving, is like kind of coming up with a needs assessment and what can you do about something right now. Another was making sure that people have enough connections with other people in the community. A third one had to do with what kinds of things are you doing to take care of yourself, and doing something for fun, because what people give up when they have lost everything is the idea that they can have any fun. They feel like, they just have to work all the time, or they're just so stressed that they forget about that. And so there's 5 of these strategies, and part of it is I did a group with I think about 8 different people who had all lost homes using those strategies, and I think the group format is really, really valuable. The second thing that's happening in our area now is the Mind-Body Medicine Center that's come to us that is training people. We've had 100 people take that training, so this is kind of like a next level. And there's 2-hour groups for 8 weeks, and people come and they sit and they listen to each other. And then they practice some of the mind-body things that we're starting to touch on in here. And so that's kind of our next response in the community, that I think people are ready to do that kind of work. And so it's exciting. I think that group therapy is very powerful because knowing that you're not alone is really, really huge. Yeah. What are some of your other questions? Yeah,
Going
Nancy.
back to the fundraising, and how did you guys, as a chapter, how did you gather sponsors? What did you do to gather those folks and donations? What did you do?
So let me make clear that I'm talking about two different financial fundraising. So we did get sponsors to come into our legal and ethical workshop this year as well as last year. And we raised anywhere from about $5,000 last year to I think about $7,500 this year for those. The $1.3 million, that was raised through the Healthcare Foundation, and that's not something that ReCamp is really overseeing. That's way too big for our association, and I guess lessons learned. We applied for a grant really not knowing what we were getting into, and then once we realized that the money was coming, we were like, well, wait a minute, we can't hire anybody and we can't pay ourselves to do these things, and this doesn't fit in with the mission of our chapter. And so we were doing a lot of backpedaling, which was unfortunate and embarrassing because we had requested the monies and then realized that we could not provide the oversight for the kinds of work that the collaborative was suggesting. And I think that everybody was kind of left scrambling to figure out, now that we've got this money, who's going to disperse it? And a big question that came up regarding doing these group therapies had to do with a healthcare foundation not wanting to hire therapists and then be responsible and liable for what those therapists were going to do. And so they wanted to divest themselves of that. So they ended up giving grants to nonprofits so that the nonprofits could do it and they would be the ones to hire the people. So it kind of morphed over time since nobody knew what was happening. It's like they kept, using the analogy of trying to fly a plane while you're building it, and that really was the case. But I think some of the great strategies that came out of it, NAMI developed a warm line and became the funnel for anybody that was a fire survivor. And then NAMI was given a list of all the resources that were going on in the community. And there were meetings to map resources and make sure that people were collaborating. So there was a lot of work to try and be in alignment and not reinvent the wheel and have too many people doing the same thing over and over again. Another good thing, there is an app, and it is noted in your paperwork. I think it's called My Sonoma Rises, or Sonoma Rises, or something like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now. And there's also a website that is dedicated to all the fire resources in the community. And those things, I think, are super valuable because there were a lot of great skills that people could use on those websites and on that app, and so they can follow themselves. And you can do this every day and see, how am I progressing? Am I having a worse day today or a better day? And there's little tools on those places that they can look at. So the goal was to try to get people in the community as equipped as possible, to give them as much information. And if you drive around town, you'll see billboards like, this is our community together. Together, we're going to get better through this. And there's a lot of supportive messages that are. Also, you'll notice there's examples of 2 handouts that were put out by the Wildfire Collaborative towards the end of your package. The colorful ones. Sorry, that's my phone ringing. Just ignore it. Did you have any other question or comment?
No. I think this handout is really valuable for chapters, how to create the disaster response at chapter level. I think the steps. This is something our chapter will be reviewing, and hopefully we can get that going.
I think it's important too, as chapters, to connect with each other on these tragedies and these disasters. So, American Red Cross contacted me after the Thousand Oaks fire to get in touch with the camp group that they could send us some resources over there. And I didn't really know who to contact, but just sort of searched. Now I know who to contact. But those kinds of things where, maybe it's outside of my community, but I can offer help or connect you up with some other resources if it's limited in your community. It's good to be managed as well.
That's right. And so, of course, Lauren invited me to come here and present today, and I thought, yes, absolutely, I want to do that because I want to empower you all in whatever shape. You may go home and not be ready to do anything with this today, but maybe in, a month or 6 months, you'll feel empowered and energized to do something about that. And then you can pick up this information and start looking. And there's a lot of good tools in here. And then, let's see what else. Oh, another thing that we did that I think was incredibly useful, we had a woman named Hannah Karate, who did some kind of trauma-informed yoga. And she not only did this herself, but she taught lots of other therapists to do this trauma-informed yoga. And I know that there have been many, many people who have gone to those classes. You
I
did?
just took a trauma-informed yoga
Awesome.
training, and it was awesome.
Isn't it
was-
wonderful?
yeah.
I know, it
It
is.
was all about the vagal nerve and the mind.
It's so lovely, yes. So if nothing else for yourself, but I think this has been just incredibly, and we, through the grant, made it so that anybody that was impacted from the fires could go to these classes for free. We had something called Shinrin Yoku, and this is forest bathing. So the idea is that you go for a meditative walk into the forest. So you can imagine for people, where there's been such devastation of our beautiful greenery, to be going into this very meditative experience outdoors has been very, very incredibly nurturing. So are we kind of at our limit for time? I'm not sure. Yeah, good. Great. I want to thank you for coming today, and feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or thoughts or comments, and I'm sure Catherine would say the same, and God bless you.